yesterday as well, which unfortunately, there was this unfortunate killing of the police even issued that press release where they talked about the unfortunate killing of Honorable Temitope Olatoye, aka Sugar, in Oyo State. Very unfortunate incident about that particular, which is what we've always tried to avoid. But as it is at the moment, there are lots of issues, areas that have raised concerns for the elections, which we're hoping that we're going to also take a look at today. While some other states, several states are expecting results to start trickling in, but there are states that some security concerns, and we're hoping that they'll be able to focus on all of those and address those issues, because I mean you can't afford to lose lives for elections, or because people want to go out and vote. It's something that shouldn't be found in our lexicon, but we're going to keep tabs on a lot of these issues, and I see them as they unfold.
You know, looking at the elections, I think that as we stand now, all eyes will be at the collation centers and how results will begin to trickle in.
Yeah.
But having said that, a lot of issues with this election, one that has to do with security, very important. We cannot shy away or run away from that. And one of the areas is in River State, in Obiakpo Unit 7, Ward 9. The governor did reference that yesterday, saying that he was not happy with the way that the military has conducted itself with concerns to that place. But that's not the only state. Rivers happens to be a state to watch. Lagos, Sokoto, Kaduna, Kano, Ogun State, I think, if I'm not mistaken, Akwa Ibom State. These are states that we had pre-elections, which we analyzed here, and have come to the conclusion that these are states to watch, and not too far-fetched that they have had a history of elections, pre-election violence, during election violence, and post-election violence. So I think that it's not over yet. The results have not started coming in. We're expecting that results will begin to come in from now till tomorrow. Hopefully we'll have those results all in by that time. But post-election violence is very, very key. And I think that the security apparatus for this election should not throw that away. The elections are not over yet. Or should I say, in most states,
in many areas,
in most states, they are over. But there are some areas that I think elections will still happen today.
Well, we'll wait until...
We're waiting to hear from INEC
to what an exercise
on that. So I think really it's not over until it's over. So we have to keep our eyes, especially the security apparatus, has to keep their eyes on the ball and not to lose sight or lose concentration on it, because we are trying to avoid post-election violence.
Well, the ball really was supposed to be just 29 governors, 29 new governors, and a significant number of, a sizable number of members of House of Assembly.
Either new or re-elected, or some new, some
new. Yes, you know. But from information available to us from the INEC chairman, in this election, there were 1,066 governorship candidates, 14,580-something contenders for the houses of assembly in so many states, and some 500 or so people contending for seats in the for the supplementary elections, National Assembly elections and all of that. What is a little displeasing, just as you both have mentioned, is that simply because, just as one of our guests said yesterday, simply because you want to get a job from people, you are desperate to get this job so much that you are willing to stake the lives of other people. We've talked about a lawmaker who is a senatorial candidate of another political party, or who was now, since he is dead. You know, he has died. That's not the only one. We also understand that a supporter of one of the political parties in the state was also killed in the same Oyo State. There were reported killings stemming from violence in You mentioned Rivers. Some have also alleged in Ondo State, Ekiti, Enugu, and other parts of the country, and stuff like that. Coupled with, and as a result of all the scare and everything, one of our guests here yesterday was analyzing that there is a significant, some viable reason why people would say, we're not going to go out to vote, we're just going to stay in here. These killings are part of the reason. Lack of trust in the system is the reason. From what everyone has said and from what this election has taught us, we need to re-engineer the entire electoral apparatus and architecture that we have for us, because most certainly we cannot continue like this.
Suffice to say that the elections, one big observation that we cannot run away from is the voter apathy. Yesterday, you could see result sheets that were practically blank with just a few names on it. People as enthusiastic as they were for the presidential elections, it was a totally different ballgame for the governorship elections. That's not just spread across the board, but in most states, the observation came in yesterday while we were on. Many people were afraid of coming out. Many people didn't feel safe coming out.
Yeah,
that is a no-no. Elections, it's supposed to be a determination of a people to elect their leaders. So if you take the people element out, what kind of election would you have at the end of the day? But, I mean, it's not in my stead to say what kind of election is it. INEC will be in position, or perhaps some other agencies, the IAGA, for instance, will be able to give us some of those stats to say whether or not the voter apathy was so widespread, such that people will begin to...
Or whether or not they thought there was voter apathy in the first place.
Or voter apathy in the first place, you know. So
we'll see.
Different strokes for different folks, so we'll be watching that space.
But you know, elections did hold yesterday, so let's take you through some of the states where it happened and the reports that our correspondents on the ground found. Take a look.
We begin from the South-South, where the governors of Cross River State, Professor Ben Ayade, and the governor of Bayelsa State, Seriake Dixon, cast their votes in their different hometowns. Professor Ayade voted alongside his wife in his ward in Obudu local government area, while Governor Dixon voted in his ward in the Sagbama local government area of Bayelsa State.
The attendance is much more today, very, very massive. I can still see the same spirit of enthusiasm. This is my primary place of birth, so definitely every son and daughter is here in their large numbers.
This should be an example to what should happen in the country home and community of a political leader. You can see that there's no violence here, nobody's been coerced, and that is the way we have kept this community.
The governors of Delta and Edo states also spoke to journalists after casting their votes. Though governorship elections are now holding in Edo State, Governor Baseki described the process as smooth.
The difference here is that you have only one election today, so the process is much smoother and quicker. But in terms of turnout, I believe we're going to see a turnout that's slightly more than what we saw the last elections for the House. Don't forget, this is a local election, and the people who are contesting live in the neighborhood and with the community. So there's been a lot of campaigning and canvassing, and I think that the voter participation is going to be higher.
Everything appears to be working perfectly well, and there has been early distribution of materials across the state too. I have been told that there's been early distribution of materials. There was an initial issue that they had in Madaho, but I've been told that those materials have now been distributed to their various wards. So I don't have any complaints anywhere yet.
In the southeast, the governors of Abia and Enugu State also joined their people to vote. Here's how they react after voting.
There's a little improvement also. People are prepared and willing to vote, and it's progressing well. I think the turnout to be slightly higher than what we saw last time.
In all we do in Enugu State, give God to glory, honor, and adoration. And by the special grace of God, this election will end in praise.
For the governors of Imo and Anambra State, they are particular that the votes reflect the wishes of the people.
The problem in our country is that people
decide to impose themselves on people using some violence means and everything. And when you do that, then it doesn't show leadership. They're not the leader. They're not the people's choice. There's no democracy there. But if you allow people to elect you, you're a Democrat and you do the people well.
I encourage the youth to stay by, watch their votes counted, and also follow through to the collation centers and make sure that their vote counts.
In the southwest, the governors of Lagos and Ogun State say that the voting process is improving.
I just finished voting with the First Lady, and in this particular polling booth, everything here has been very peaceful.
It's better, slightly better, in terms of even the turnout, in terms of even the waiting time on queue to cast our vote is better. So I pray that it's going to be like this throughout the length and breadth of Ogun State. In terms of security, you could see it's seamless. No friction, nothing untoward. So I'm happy. The only thing, and I've stressed it, is that we have too many political parties, but no problems. I mean, that is where we found ourselves. But I think going forward, we should be able to look into the possibility of limiting the number of political parties to maybe maximum of 6.
In the northwest, the governors of Zamfara, Kano, Kaduna, and Jigawa states all noted that the elections were largely peaceful. Governor Nasser El-Rufai also commended the security process.
Logistics have improved, materials are on time, and there are no major issues with the card reader all across the state. Secondly, the security arrangements have also improved. In this polling unit alone, I can see 5 to 6 uniformed personnel, police, immigration, customs, and the prison service. And this is very helpful in making people feel safe and secure to come out and vote.
In the northeast, the governors of Bauchi and Taraba also agree that the election process is better.
The process of casting the vote at this polling unit is quite okay, simple, straightforward, and it is very organized here.
The process was very smooth. You could see within a short period of time, my 2 wives were accredited and I was accredited, and I have voted. So there's an improvement on the process from the last time.
And we round off in the North Central with the reaction of the governor of Kogi State, Yahaya Bello.
The accreditation started very early and the voting started very early. It goes simultaneously, and the people are very orderly. The state is very orderly so far. The report I'm having from all the corners of Kogi State, and hopefully everything is going to go on very smoothly. I commend INEC for a job well done.
Attention will now shift to INEC for the announcement of results. Shola Shieli, Channels Television News.
All right. Some of the areas where elections held, and well, yes, we're going to go over some of those reports. This morning we've got Professor Idowu Shobowale joining us in our studio this morning. We also have Kiari Booker, former chairman, National Economic Summit Group. Gentlemen, thank you for coming on this morning, sirs. And then, good morning. Good morning. In Abuja, we've got Samson Itodo, Executive Director, Yaga Africa. Samson, thank you for joining us as well. But let me start with you, Samson. Reports that Yaga was not going to deploy the, the PVT for this election. So was that the case? And what informed that decision?
Thank you very much. Good morning. The nature of the PVT is such that it will be very difficult to deploy PVT in 29 states where governorship elections are holding. Because for presidential elections, we see the country as one constituency. And so running a sample would require that each state will have its own different sample size. And that takes huge resources, it's huge logistics. Just for the presidential elections, deploying the PVT took us about 2 years to plan, prepare, and then deploy the kind of human assets that we deployed. So that is why we didn't deploy the PVT for these governorship elections in 29 states. But we will be deploying the PVT in the staggered elections in Kogi, as well as Bayelsa, and the other seeks, in the other elections holding next year as well as in the build-up to the 2023 elections. But it's a Herculean task to deploy PVT for 29 governorship elections because the number of parties are also differ. So when you look at both sampling, you look at the technology infrastructure, you look at resources, it is practically a Herculean task. We're not saying it's not possible, but it's very, very, very difficult, and it will constitute a huge statistical nightmare if we deploy the PVT for the governorship elections in 29 states.
All right, so, but we've seen some reports that you issued concerning some states, Akwa Ibom, Rivers, Zamfara, how some observers were prevented from those collation centers. Tell us about it. What exactly transpired?
Well, thank you very much. Chamberlain and the colleagues in Lagos, if there's one thing this election has done to Nigeria, it's further exposed our commitment to democracy, our commitment to credible elections. It is obvious that the greatest threat to our political process, the greatest threat to our democracy, are the ruling political elite. What transpired yesterday, despite commitment on the part of the Electoral Commission to improve on the presidential elections, we could see that politicians used apparatus of state to disrupt the electoral process and the elections. You can see the number of deaths that we're recording again, and this is really unacceptable. Yesterday, during the collation process, in Rivers, in Akwa Ibom, in Imo, in Zamfara, military men literally chased observers and some party agents out of the collation centers when the results came in from the polling unit at the local government collation centers. And we did issue an election rigging alert that the lack of transparency of the results collation process, it threatens the integrity of the election results that will come from those particular locations. And we are watching the collation process in 642 local governments in the 29 states. And that's all the local governments in the 29 states where governorship elections are holding. You could see in some states that the military was deliberate in disrupting the process. They were there hijacking election materials, in some cases also, intimidating polling officials. And that's really unacceptable. How can INEC conduct an election in an atmosphere where the security agencies, particularly the army, hijack the whole architecture of election security management? And that is really condemnable. And yesterday afternoon, we did issue a statement. Other observer groups also issue a statement calling on the president to call the military to order, because it was obvious that the military deployment for this election was not to protect the ballot papers or sensitive materials or election officials. It was to disrupt the process. You could see, how come we still have reports and cases of disruption, reports and cases of burning of election materials in some centers, despite this massive deployment of security? One would have thought that this security that was deployed for this election in this amount was to curb these forms of disruption. But how come we still have this disruption? Look at Akwa Ibom. We should be ashamed as a nation that our ruling political elite are instrumentalizing our security agencies, who ought to be protectors of the people. They are the ones constituting the greatest threat to our democracy. And this is really unacceptable. And I think Nigeria as a nation needs to rise up and condemn the role, the ignoble role that the military played in this election.
Well, Professor Shobali, what do you think of his impressions of what happened?
If what he's saying is true, and I have no reason to doubt him, then I think I'll be on the same page with him. At this stage of our development, we should be seen to be able to conduct simple elections. But I say simple, I mean, it's not that I'm trivializing the complexity and of it, but the fact that we cannot, at this stage, get ourselves together to enumerate ourselves, I think leaves much to be desired. He has mentioned the security agencies, but the politicians themselves cannot absolve themselves of blame in this matter, okay? And we can only get worse if something is not done by the authority, okay? Because those who spare their time to vote would also want to protect their votes. And the consequence of that, if you have this kind of behavior, is that you're going to have many people sacrificing their lives in the process of voting, which is needless.
Dr. Kyari, what should we be, in your view, what should we be concerned with now that we're expecting the results? That is one. But what should be the paramount issues we should be concerned with regards to this election?
I believe there is a much greater issue at stake here, and that is institutionalization of all the things that we do as a country. Military, when I used to grow up, military was the only cohesive, united, extremely professional entity within the country. There were no tribes, there were no sections. But apparently military is today, based on what the executive director just mentioned, may be tiptoeing into partisanship if we go that far as to send out agents of political parties or other parties or whatever the case might be out of a room when counting is taking place. Even though counting had ended, but this is where the results are being collated. Then we have something that is much at stake, and it's extremely grave for our nation. Everybody talks about the progress we have made so far in the voting, in the exercises, and the processes we've gone through, and we shouldn't take even one step backwards. Which is what this is appearing to be as far as I'm concerned. So professionalism of the military need to be there. In fact, I was just joking earlier before we got into the studio that the military should have remained in the barracks. It's none of their business. We're not fighting a war. We're just conducting an elections. They shouldn't be out and about, period. It is a civil matter. Democracy has nothing to do with the military, and therefore they shouldn't have even come out of their barracks in the first place. But having said that, where there are incidences like we have seen 2 weeks ago of burning ballots, of snatching boxes, the police and the civil defense should have join in and done something about it. The second thing is that I think one of your reporters in either Imo or someplace yesterday was narrating the story of in celebration of the International Women's Day, it was the women that apprehended somebody who walked away with result sheets or whatever. And to me, even the citizens could jump into certain things if there were no guns around. But police should have been the only law enforcement agency, along with their civil or civil forces that are around to conduct and to bring in a certain level of decorum and civility into elections in this country.
You mentioned the civilians the other time.
Right.
It gives one a bit of a concern because ultimately, elections are supposed to recruit people to run government and make the lives of the people better. If the process of getting them into office is like this, will the people be able to trust their capacity to govern the way they expect?
In fact, that also talks about the fact that we haven't, this time around, and maybe even a couple of elections back, we haven't been discussing issues. Because elections are about issues. And issues means that I, as an average citizen, what is it that you are going to bring about in your programs that would affect my life, the hope that I have for better existence, etc., etc. Those have not been articulated, even at the lower levels, which is where government is closest to me. You know, local government elections, state house of assembly elections, those are the ones that are more pertinent to the average citizen than the national elections, so to speak, even though with the kind of setup we have, the national elections dictates how you would get benefits from the federal level. So the fundamental thing is actually issues-based election. In fact, the reason why we may even have the voter apathy that people are talking about is that most people don't actually see what is in it for them. It's not the 500 naira or 1,000 naira that are given at the polling units. I'm talking about how their lives are going to be affected by the programs of the politicians or the political parties. Nobody had discussed in great detail what they would do about education, about infrastructure, indeed about jobs and the economy.
So people don't have expectations?
Exactly. Or the expectations have been so abysmally low that they basically feel, any one of them would not affect my life that much, so why should I go out and vote?
All right,
and risk my life in the process.
Yeah. We'll go to break. Still a long way to go on this session. Don't go away. We'll be right back.